Tim Pool just dropped this video on how the war in Iran might actually be the grand strategy of Trump.
Donald Trump's plan for world domination is nearly complete. And yes, I mean that literally. There's a great thread going around showing piece by piece exactly what Donald Trump has done on the world stage. And it would seem all of his efforts are around making the United States the dominant unipolar power.
That is a good idea.
When Donald Trump said he was going to make America great again, it wasn't just about internally. It was also about what was going on around the world. Now, truth be told, I actually don't think this was originally Donald Trump's plan. I think when Trump first got into office, his plan was secure our borders, bolster the American people, boost our manufacturing base, and make our country strong. But he quickly learned something. The United States was being displaced around the world by a rival economic system, something that would shutter the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia had a contract to use the U.S. dollar to sell oil, but they got off that contract. Venezuela seized our oil assets, cutting us off from a major secondary supply. Now, all of this was going on in the last 10 to 15 years, 20 years or so, and it was the dismantling of the United States as the dominant power.
This is true.
The theory is the Democrats fearing Thucydides' trap. If you're not familiar, that's when the dominant power is on decline, it declares war on the ascendant power. The ascendant power, of course, being China or the BRICS nations. The theory is that Democrats and other elites decided they'd offshore their wealth to China and other countries and intentionally nuke the United States.
So Democrats are assuming the CCP government will share power with the US, 50-50. What do you think? Do you think they will? Comment down below. Okay, Tim just mentioned Thucydides' trap, and this is the crux of this video. Depending on how you look at it, you might still think Trump is reckless by the end of this video. Thucydides was an ancient Greek historian who wrote on Peloponnesian War. He observed when a rising power like China threatens to overtake an established power like the US, war becomes almost inevitable. Not because either side wants it, but because the fear and suspicion on both sides makes it unavoidable. And in history, 12 out of 16 times, these scenarios did end up in war. And the Democrat theory was, step back, share power, let China rise, don't fight it, we avoid World War III. I think it's naive, it's cowardly, and it's actually the most dangerous option on the table. It's naive because you don't share hegemony. That's not a thing. That has never been a thing in the entire history of civilization. China wants domination. You can ask Tibet, ask Hong Kong, ask Taiwan how that sharing's going. It's cowardly because it dresses up surrender as strategy. Calling it power sharing doesn't change what it is. You're telling the American people and the entire Western world, we've decided you're going to be less prosperous, less secure, and less free because we don't have the stomach to compete. That's not diplomacy. That's giving up and putting a nice label on it. And it's risky. This is the part people miss because it doesn't actually avoid the trap. Thucydides' trap doesn't just trigger when the established power fights back. It triggers when there's a power transition, period. If America steps back and China steps forward, you still get instability. You still get conflict. Except now, you're fighting from a position of weakness instead of strength. You haven't avoided the war, you've just made sure you lose it. Trump's answer is the exact opposite. Don't step back, press every advantage you have. Energy, the dollar, trade routes, military, technology. Make sure the rising power never actually overtakes you. Don't avoid the trap by surrendering. Avoid the trap by winning so decisively that there's nothing left to fight over. And that's what this entire video is really about. The X thread is saying the war is not just about oil or Iran, or not even about the Jews. It's about Trump pulling off the most aggressive play for American dominance since the Cold War.
Thread showing point by point Trump's world domination plan. And then I'm going to show you some examples. I think this makes it very clear exactly what is going on. And it looks like Trump and the United States are on the verge of a tremendous victory. And I really do mean it. And I'm going to tell you this too.
I really hope so. I really want to believe this.
This is not a statement to say you should support it. The craziest thing to me and the most annoying, I got to be honest, is when I'm like, a thing is happening and people go, you want thing to happen? I'm like, no, it's happening. There is an attempt to create a new world order where the U.S. steps down from its hegemonic role. That's happening. It doesn't mean I'm for or against it. It doesn't matter. It's a thing I'm telling you is happening. Well, all of these diehard Trumpers are like, I can't believe Tim is with Tucker Carlson. Just because I said something was happening, you people are nuts. If you want to get a glimpse at the moves Trump is making, cast aside your assumptions about what needs to be, what should be, and just take a look at what is happening. Tehran says no, but Trump won't back down. And this thread is incredible.
The thread explains how Trump really was playing the fourth dimensional chess, and it gives me heaps of hope, which was much needed, honestly.
It's from 10 Delta on X, not a particularly prominent individual, and it's a cartoon avatar. So I don't know who this person is, but they lay out with expert analysis. Maybe it's AI, maybe it's not, but I look at this and I say, yeah, this lines up with everything we've discussed. When I see people say, oh, we're going to war in Ukraine for Israel because Zelensky's a Jew, I'm like, you made that up.
Yeah, so the anti-Jew narrative, it's actually not about the Jews. It's actually definitely masking people and entities that are benefiting from that narrative. It's not about whether or not you like Jews or Israel deserves a land or anything. It's about masking Russia and China. That's just my opinion.
That doesn't align in any way with our attempts at building gas pipelines or dealing with the Russian gas monopoly. But this thread nails it. 10 Delta says, 3 weeks ago, I argued the U.S. goal in Iran is to seize the global oil spigot, Venezuela in January, Iran in February. Neutralize every supply chain outside the dollar system so within 90 days, achieve a compliant successor government and complete energy dominance. The oil thesis was the obvious layer. However, when you zoom out and view the last 4 years as a single sequence, rather than isolated geopolitical events, the architecture of the grander U.S. plan becomes visible. First was Europe, which laid the groundwork. The Ukraine conflict provided the justification for sanctions that collapsed Russian pipeline gas from 150 billion cubic meters to 40. Then Nord Stream was destroyed, which rewired the entire European energy system permanently. The U.S. went from supplying 28% of Europe's liquid natural gas in 2021 to 58% in 25, exporting a record 111 million MTs, the first country in history to break 100. That is metric tons, I believe. Europe was transformed from a customer with options into a captive market, now purchasing its survival in USD. I also want to point out the Gazprom natural gas monopoly and Burisma and that whole scandal. We know about the Qatar-Turkey pipeline. The U.S. was trying to get its own pipeline from Iraq through Syria, Turkey, and Europe to displace Russia as 20% of natural gas. Second was Syria. The fall of Assad severed the critical node connecting China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Mediterranean. The trilateral railway linking Iran, Iraq, and Syria, designed to bypass Western maritime choke points, was completely destroyed. This isolated Iran geographically and cleared the path for what came next. Third was Venezuela. In January, the U.S. effectively took control of the world's largest heavy crude reserves. The U.S. Gulf Coast has the most advanced refining complex on Earth, specifically built for heavy sour crude. Phillips 66, Valero, and the rest are now positioned to process hundreds of thousands of barrels of Venezuelan crude daily. The U.S. captured a massive strategic reserve and solidified its position as the dominant exporter of refined petroleum products, an industry worth $110 billion in 2025 alone. Venezuela and Iran were two major oil supply channels that existed outside the dollar system. Both produced heavy crude sold primarily to China and evaded U.S. financial supervision, both now being neutralized within 90 days, which leads us to
Yes, so the US couldn't let China do this. Do you see that?
Iran and the Middle East energy shock. Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, the world's largest natural gas reservoir. Iran retaliated against Qatar's Ras Laffan, the single largest LNG facility on Earth, responsible for a fifth of global supply. Qatar Energy's own assessment is that 17% of export capacity is gone, and recovery will take up to 5 years. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. European gas prices spiked 70%. Asian spot prices doubled.
So the Strait of Hormuz being closed, it's not the end of the world. It's part of the plan.
The only remaining scaled supplier, the United States. If Iran falls and a successor government is installed that the U.S. controls or influences, the Delsey model described weeks ago, then roughly 40 to 45 million barrels per day of global production out of 103 million is effectively under U.S. control. OPEC becomes irrelevant because the U.S. coalition is now the marginal producer.
That's kind of genius.
Now add the gas dimension, and it goes beyond oil. The war is solidifying the petrodollar system as it evolves into a hybrid petro-LNG dollar. The old system was built on Saudi crude priced in USD. The new system is built on American crude plus American gas from the Gulf Coast, with no alternative supplier of comparable scale. The dependency is deeper because LNG infrastructure requires long-term contracts and regasification terminals that lock buyers into supply relationships for decades. Europe and the Pacific allies cannot pivot away, as there is nowhere left to pivot to.
So this isn't a bad thing because the middle powers and the US allies, when there's no certainty that the US is the hegemony, it's not so easy for them. It's not so easy for them to go 50-50 between China and the US. It's always a good thing to provide them with certainty. And the US is the better certainty, 100%.
They're now locked into the U.S. energy system. The market confirms this. DXY went from 96 to 101, gold down around 20% from its January all-time high, Bitcoin down 20% on the year, Brent above 100. European and Asian institutions are liquidating precious metals and crypto to buy dollars because they need dollars to buy the only remaining scaled energy supply. The world is selling its gold to buy American energy in American currency. The dollar is now being weaponized through energy dependence. The structural repricing is happening regardless of how the conflict resolves. But the U.S. grand strategy goes deeper. Artificial intelligence is a physical industry. It runs on power and chips. Data centers require massive uninterrupted baseload electricity, primarily provided by natural gas. Semiconductor fabrication requires helium and rare earths.
This is really good news, and it's something that I didn't really think about with this war that's happening right now. And I'm really glad to hear. I'm not actually entirely sure if Trump was really planning all this or if it's just a finger of God, but I am glad that someone has actually put this together.
Choking the Strait of Hormuz and crippling Middle Eastern LNG and helium production, the U.S. is systematically degrading China's ability to power its data centers and fabricate semiconductors at scale. The U.S. is energy self-sufficient, especially with newly captured Venezuelan reserves and expanding Gulf Coast capacity running on domestic gas. On the other hand, China is import dependent, and every jewel it imports effectively now transits choke points the U.S. Navy controls. Iran was the Belt and Roads overland energy bypass.
See, I actually didn't know that. This is amazing.
Corridor that allowed China to mitigate the Malacca trap. With Iran neutralized, that corridor is severed. China faces a world where its compute infrastructure competes for scraps in a depleted global LNG market, while American data centers run at full capacity on domestic energy. Russia is next in the sequence. A post-war Iran reopening under U.S. influence competes directly with Russia for the same refineries in China and India at lower cost. Iran's production costs are lower, Russia loses its last structural advantage in heavy crude and its economic lifeline. Additionally, under the Iran war cover, Ukraine has been opportunistically destroying Russian energy infrastructure, and all signs point towards Russia being at the very end of the line. The message from Washington becomes very simple. We dismantled 2 regimes in 3 months. Your economy is about to get crushed.
That is genius.
Sign the Ukraine deal. Then Trump sits down with Xi holding every card. Complete energy dominance. The hybrid petro LNG dollar fortified, Iran cleared, Russia cornered, and China facing the Malacca trap fully closed with no remaining energy bypass. Israel and the GCC are absorbing the kinetic cost of a conflict whose primary beneficiary, counter to the mainstream narrative, is actually America first. They put
So Trump was MAGA and he still is MAGA.
in parentheses. Qatar offline for 5 years, reprices the entire global gas market in favor of U.S. exporters for the remainder of the decade. The Gulf states face years of rebuilding. Europe faces its second energy crisis in 4 years. Sure, the average American might face temporary moderate inflation and higher gas prices. But if you're the architect of the U.S. empire and you view the rise of China and Chinese ASI as an existential winner-takes-all scenario, the collateral damage is acceptable cost. Whoever controls the energy corridors controls the monetary system. Whoever controls the monetary
Exactly.
system and the energy supply simultaneously controls the compute infrastructure that determines which civilization builds artificial superintelligence first. The U.S. is seizing all 3.
You really don't want China to be building ASI.
Indeed, my friends, I look at this and I'm just like, wow. I think that hits the nail on the head with the hammer. We have long addressed geopolitics on this channel on Timcast IRL. And as I mentioned, it's only surface level, what we think we know. Well, what we know, the seizure of Venezuela, the collapse of Cuba, everything is falling in line to the U.S. order. And it starts with
This is music to my ear because last few weeks I was actually quite despondent. I was questioning everything I was believing and everything that I was consuming. But this video is such a godsend to me.
Trump. Now, it may be, the Democrats wanted this multipolar world, a new world order. China was being emboldened, but not anymore. And maybe this is why they wanted so desperately to stop Trump, to lock him up, to throw away the key. But again, I don't know. Maybe Trump's been a part of this the whole time. Maybe Trump and the deep state have been working together. Maybe the conflict in the United States
I think it really doesn't matter what actually happened behind the scene, and we'll never know anyway.
is all just part of the plan. I don't think so. I think what's actually happening is Trump has forced the deep state to reverse course. I think what we are seeing is the Trump administration saying, we will not have a new world order. America will be great. And what does that mean? The old boomer liberal economic order will be re-emboldened. The petrodollar will return. And that's why we had the Abraham Accords. That's why Donald Trump wants control of Panama, the Suez Canal, and Greenland. The U.S. will control all of the global trade routes and energy infrastructure. And Trump is telling the rest of the world, you will fall in line. Now, Iran seems to be quite difficult. Trump is facing, well, he's facing some, let's just call it road bumps.
Yeah, he's not really winning the information warfare, that's for sure. Even from his side, the right's sort of given up on him. I'm not sure if that's the right way to put it, but yeah.
Support is down. And if Democrats win in November, I do think things will get bad, and this can undermine everything. Maybe the reason Trump is making these moves is that he knows this would be his last opportunity. And if he can push this over the edge, there is nothing the deep state can do to actually stop Trump's plan to restore the U.S. as the dominant unipolar power.
That's good, and it's all going to be fine.
Now, recently, there have been some accusations. I think I have the tweet here somewhere. Actually, I don't know. I thought I had it pulled up. There's a tweet, suspicious. Oh, yeah, we got the whole thing pulled up, right? I don't know. That's not it. There was a post that I thought I had pulled up. Is it over here? I guess I don't. It was accusing influencers of being on the payroll of China. And I just eschew these things, right? Everybody's being accused of being an influencer for some network. I've been accused of being pro and anti-Israel. I've been accused of being Russian, and I've been accused of being pro and anti-Russia at the same time. It is the weirdest thing imaginable. I've been accused of being pro and anti-Tucker. Well, if you don't fit the mold, right? I am not here to tell you what should be. I am here to tell you what likely is.
I mean, I sort of agree with Tim here, but if you run a huge political channel, people are going to accuse you of all sorts of things, and it's really not a big deal. I've heard a few times him defending himself, but really, I think he's original, his views are unique, and he's smart in his own way. I think he really should not worry about other people's opinion.
I don't have access to private information, so I really don't know. I'm looking at surface level information to break these things down. But what I will say is it very much appears Donald Trump's plan is to restore the unipolar dominance of the United States. We look at a lot of individuals. They seem to be on the side of our adversaries, at least from their perspective. I'm not saying they're literally part of Russian intel ops or anything like that. I'm saying they don't like U.S. hegemonic power. Many of these people were previously aligned with Democrats. Some of them were Republicans and are now seemingly aligned with Democrats. It would seem to me that there is an effort from the establishment power, starting with Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, and Barack Obama, I should say, to undermine U.S. authority around the world, to destroy what it means to be American. And you see this in a post made by Iran, an AI video showing all of these countries that apparently colonizers have damaged. A Native American looking over at missiles. And of course, this aligns with the leftist.
Yeah, so decolonization and any sort of narrative around that, they are definitely anti-American and they are anti-West. And I would even go so far as to say they're demonic.
Progressive worldview that America is inherently bad. Well, Donald Trump said he wanted to make America great again. So I wonder, was he actually referring to everything America has done since World War II? You know, we had a major economic boom after World War II because we destroyed the industries of so many other countries. After World War II, Japan and Germany were decimated. And decimated, of course, means to reduce in power number. It literally means to reduce by 10%. So yes, indeed, their power was curtailed. And then everybody had to buy from us. Seems like that's the Trump strategy. Everyone's going to have to buy from the United States. Now, how does Israel play a role in that? There are forward military bases in the Middle East effectively. Now, there are people that are...
Yeah, this is a good way to think about Israel. They have a role to play. They are an ally. They have their own agenda. But to go down the rabbit hole of how evil they are and all that sort of stuff, it's not about the Jews. It's about who's going to be the next superpower. Think about that.
coming out saying Israel is bad.
Would you rather China be the one? Or do you appreciate America as the hegemony?
I don't care for Israel's ideology. I don't care for these stupid arguments about, does Israel have a right to exist? I don't care, literally, one way or the other.
This is a good way to think about it.
They're a forward military base and weapons manufacturer for the United States. What they do is what they want to do, and certainly they have their grand visions in Zionism and Messianic whatever. But Donald Trump's effort...
So he's saying America is profiting from the relationship with Israel, like very practically.
In Venezuela, Panama, Greenland have nothing to do with Israel. Taiwan. I think it's clear that America's interests are America's own.
Yep.
And Donald Trump is doing these things to put the U.S. back on top, to make America great again. Now, I didn't see this coming. I can say that, early on, my view was that it was the Clintons, it was the Obamas, it was the deep state that wanted to have this global oil infrastructure. And then now, based on what Trump is doing, I can say a couple of things. Maybe I was wrong, and this was Trump's play the whole time, and I couldn't see it. Maybe Trump wasn't focused on it, and now he is. So I wonder, I think the issue with Barack Obama and the Democrats is that
Do you think maybe there is a value in not telling the mass exactly what you're doing at every single step? Comment down below.
well, I view them as deeply amoral individuals, power-hungry individuals of a crackpot Marxist ideology. Yeah, gay communism. Donald Trump represents America, but I think when push comes to shove, his administration is very much looking at securing the United States as the top of the power chart, of the global org chart, as it were.
Yeah, communism is gay actually.
The
Like quite figuratively and definitely practically as well.
hegemonic power of the world. I believe that Iran is the last piece, the most difficult piece, and that's why we're seeing it happen now. If Trump succeeds in Iran, it would seem the rest of the world will fall into Trump's world order. What does that mean for us? It's going to be great. Complain all you want about global power and world police, and certainly I have my reservations. I'm largely skeptical of a lot of this. But I'll tell you, cheap things, free energy, cheap labor, America will be the capital city. If you don't like it, you're allowed to complain. If you do like
You can also move to Russia or China.
it, well, congratulations. If you don't care one way or the other, enjoy your cheap pizza, cheap beer, and movies. We'll see how it plays out. I'm going to leave it there. Smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Stick around. We got more coming up for you throughout the day, and we'll see you all in the next segment.
How great was that? Subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one.